Welcome to the Carleena Show, where ordinary people share their hero's journey. I'm your host, Carleena Angwin, and this is episode 14 of the podcast. Today on the show, we have Lynne Forrest. Lynne is the author of the book, Guiding Principles for a Life Beyond Victim Consciousness. She's an international speaker and group facilitator, and the creator of the Happy Kid Toolkit. Lynne teaches that people perceive life in one of two ways. We're either reacting out of the victim mind, or we see life through the eyes of the observer mind, which witnesses without judgment. In Lynne's work, she helps people find and clear the painful beliefs and ideas that have caused them distress through a process of connecting with the observer self. You may notice this episode is a little different from previous episodes, where I've guided guests through their personal hero's journey. My hope is to sprinkle in guests like Lynne who can offer tools for your hero's journey toolbox. If you love an episode or know someone who should be on the show, reach out to me and let me know. Visit the Carleena Show website at carleena.net. That's CARLEENA.net. From there, you can find links to the show notes, past episodes, and sign up on the mailing list and receive emails when a new episode is published. Before I bring you Lynne, I'd like to thank Stephen Lorca for video editing and production. His work allows us to post our episodes on the Carleena Show YouTube channel, as well as the podcast. I'd also like to thank my 13-year-old dog, Luna, who sleeps next to me and snores when I record my Skype conversations and episode intros. Consider her sound effects added texture. Now I bring you Lynne Forrest.
Thank you for this opportunity. I appreciate it and look forward to it.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest. I've had your book in my house for, when did you publish it?
2010.
2010. It could have been right around 2010. I had a friend who went to one of your workshops in Monteagle. And I'm not going to mention her name for her confidentiality, but she came back and she was just raving about your workshop and told me about this book. And so I got it. Yeah, it could have been 2010, 2011. So.
All right.
Yeah.
That's great. Well, I don't know that I don't know much about you other than you made some kind of comment, and I went and looked over and saw what you were doing. And I thought, you know what? She's in Chattanooga. I would love to reach out to my Chattanooga folks there. So I'm in Florida right now. I'm in St. Pete.
Okay.
So yeah. I'm here. My daughter still lives in Fort Oglethorpe.
Okay.
And she runs the business really, and then just pretty much tells me what to do. She gives me my assignments.
Okay. Well, she might be neighbors with my mom. My mom lives close to Fort Oglethorpe as well.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
So there's rumors that I might move back there at least part-time. So we'll see how that works out.
Well, maybe we can get together face-to-face and have coffee.
That would be awesome.
I would like that.
Yes, I would like that too.
Okay, so tell me a little bit about you, about what you're up to now.
Well, let's see, what am I up to now? We're busy. We're developing a couple of projects. One is a Reality Formula Live, which is an online bi-monthly podcast where it's a membership where people join, and then they tune in twice a month, and I give live presentations and answer their questions. So because I have a following around the world, it's international, so this allows people wherever for a minimal cost to have access to me. So that's why I love doing it. And then they can ask me questions, and then they also get a chance to work on their issues if they don't mind it being public. But it's not really public because it's a paying subscription, so it's members only. So I do that. We're busy with that, and then we're also working on a certification course for Reality Formula.
Okay.
I developed this program for children, the Reality Formula, and Danielle Alvarez Greer, who's in Chattanooga, is she spearheads that, and bought the product called the Happy Kid Toolkit from me, bought the license for it, and although I still own the intellectual rights, but she's the one that's taking it into school systems and that kind of thing.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we developed that for families and children and schools.
Okay.
And that's a little more energy than I want to expend these days, but she's a go-getter, so she's out there doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
She has her own training. She's training young teachers who want to take it out in the model. So reality formula coaches.
Okay. All right. Well, so how about, normally I have people go back to the beginning of their journey and walk me through, but I think right now, could you just go ahead and describe what is victim consciousness, just so we have an idea of what it is, and is victim consciousness the same thing as victim?
That's a really good question, yes. And it's a good thing. It's a good place to start.
Yeah.
Victim consciousness is a state of consciousness that all humans are prone to. And we move in and out of victim consciousness all day long. Some of us get in it and stay in it, live in it more often. Others of us visit it and then step back from it. But victim consciousness is any time that we are making the outside world responsible for our unhappiness. When I say he made me feel, she kept me from, they won't let me have, it's that blame. Anytime we're blaming something out there for our unhappiness, or our happiness for that matter, we're seeing ourselves at the mercy. We're saying that thing is in charge of whether or not I get to have a good day. That person determines my degree of happiness. And when we get, and you can see how that gets complicated in relationship, for instance, because now I need you. If I believe you're responsible for my happiness, you better believe I'm going to be about controlling you. That's where control is born. That's what control is all about. Control comes from the misconception that my okayness is based on something outside me. So then I get busy trying to manipulate and control the outside world so that it will give me the experience that I'm looking for. That's victim consciousness.
Okay.
It's very different than being a victim. You can be a victim and not even go into victim consciousness. And that is that the difference is that when I look out at the world and I understand that it's not what's happening out there that determines how I feel, but it's what I tell myself it means. So you frown at me, and if I tell myself that's about me and that you don't like me and that you've got something in for me, and then because the reality formula, and it's an actual formula that all minds do, goes like this. When we believe what we think, two things automatically happen. The first thing is that we will have the feelings that go with that belief, with that thought. And the second thing is that we will begin to act as if it's true. And when I feel and act as if what I'm thinking, believing is true, I will act in ways that will bring me the evidence to prove me right. That's just the way, that's reality. It's the way it works.
Right.
So we're always proving whatever it is we believe.
So could you talk about the three different points of the triangle and what they represent and how you kind of shift from one to the other?
Yeah. So there are three positions in victim consciousness. Anytime we're in victim consciousness, we're going to be one of those three roles. And we always start out in the victim. That is, I'm at the mercy of that thing out there. It's what's making me unhappy. And so I feel at the mercy of it. And I feel out of control around it. I feel powerless. I feel at the mercy. And so that's the victim role. And that's, if you think about an inverted triangle, that's at the bottom. That's why it's inverted, that triangle. The victim is at the bottom. And then the second position, if we just do it in order. Now, we don't necessarily move around it like this, but if we were the way it evolves, because these are also levels of maturity. All of us are born feeling at the mercy of our parents, at the world. This is how I know that victim consciousness is innate in all humans. I believe that it's a state of consciousness that we come to work through. it's a stage of development. It's about, this is what maturity is about. We move from victim consciousness into what I call observer consciousness as a grown up.
Mm-hmm.
Some of us never get there.
Mm-hmm.
The second stage, the second level of maturity, the second position on the triangle is of the persecutor, or you could call it the bully. That is, you see it in every 2-year-old. It's that place of, that's mine, wham, wham. This is when I believe that out there, whatever it is making me feel bad. I'm going, the first response in as we in immaturity and as we begin is to attack. I'm going to take it back. I'm going to make somebody pay for that. And we see it all the time. We see it in politics. We see it everywhere. It's that
Mm-hmm.
second stage of victim consciousness. And then the third stage and the third role is rescuer. And that's about as good as it gets on our planet at this time. This is about as far as we have evolved as humans.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it doesn't mean everybody. I'm seeing more and more. We're getting the invitation to step up to a fourth level. But when we look back and we look at the state of things today, we pretty much live on those three roles. And the third role, rescuer,
Mm-hmm.
is when we decide that, I don't want to attack. I want to be a grown-up here. I want to take responsibility, but I'm still blaming. I'm saying it's because of that, and they're being unfair, and that shouldn't happen, and I'm going to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to take charge.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to control it, manipulate it, placate it, because the assumption is, as a rescuer, I know what needs the way it should be. I know the way it needs to be, and I'm right.
Mm-hmm.
And this is the third position on the triangle. The thing about any one of those three
Mm-hmm.
is that they move around. You can go any direction, back and forth from rescuer to victim,
Right.
from persecutor to victim, back and forth from rescuer to persecutor, or in any direction. The thing is you won't just stay in one position. You'll be moving around the triangle, and all of those positions are based in blame. They're all about pointing at the outside world and making someone else outside of me responsible for where I am, the way I see the world.
Right, right. And what is you mentioned there was a fourth dimension?
There's a fourth level of maturity that we are being invited to do. And the requirement to move into the fourth level is that we give up blame. We stop blaming. We stop blaming ourselves, because victim consciousness comes out of, first of all, we play it with ourselves. We see ourselves as victims. We victimize ourselves. We persecute ourselves. I shouldn't be thinking that. What's wrong with me that I'm like that? I don't do enough. That blah, blah, blah. And then we rescue ourselves. Oh, well, I feel bad, but I'll just have a drink. I'll watch TV. I'll numb out. I'll medicate. I'll fix it. I'll get on a health plan. I'm going to fix it somehow. The fourth level is when I move into the witness, the observer. We call it observer consciousness, which means I stop blaming. I step back, and instead of going, what do I need to do about that out there that's in charge? I ask myself the question, what am I believing right now that has me blaming? And is it true? And is there another way to see this? And that there are 10 guiding principles that I've developed that are based on ancient laws. You find them in every doctrine of truth, including the Bible. You find it in all of the various philosophies and religion where there is truth. And I've coined 10 of them, and that they help us access observer consciousness. They help us step out of blame, help us understand that and take responsibility, meaning the ability to respond. Not too often and one of the reasons why so few people take responsibility, self-responsibility, is because they believe that means instead of it's their fault, it's my fault. That's what self-responsibility means to the masses. That's not what responsibility is. Self-responsibility is the ability to question what I believe and step up beyond blame, above blame, and go, well, what can I learn from this? There's no accidents. Why would this? We're vibrational beings. How is it that I've attracted this into my life? What can I learn from it? How is it an initiation? How can I transform it? How can I grow from it? How is it for me? That is what we begin to do.
Can you give me an example, paint a picture of a person? It doesn't have to be a real person, but maybe just um, someone who comes to one of your workshops or who starts out and they're in victim consciousness and sort of the patterns that they're creating for themselves. And then how is it that they move from victim consciousness to observer consciousness?
I mean, there's so many examples. We could take anything. It'd be great if you give me anyone who's saying, okay, it's my husband. My husband makes me miserable. He won't do this. He does too much. He does too much. He does too much of that. He doesn't give me. He's not loving. He's not kind. He's selfish. So let's say I have a client, and that's her. That's what she comes in talking to me about is how she's been mistreated, betrayed, hurt by this other person, and so it's just simply asking questions. I don't tell her she's wrong. It's not about blaming. It's not about saying, well, what's your part in this? It's about beginning to. I pull in the guiding principles, and what the very first guiding principle says that there are no accidents. That because the second principle says, because we're vibrational, which means that thoughts are electromagnetic. And when I think a thought, I project the energy. I project the energy in the form of emotion. Emotion is the vibrational read on the thoughts I'm thinking. That's what emotion does. It always reports to us exactly where we are vibrationally, and that's its job. So when we're feeling good, we know that we're not in victim consciousness. We're an observer. We're aligned with reality. That's how we know. But when I'm feeling afraid or mad or blaming or rejected or betrayed, then I know that I'm believing a story, because we all have core beliefs that we're even born with them. They're lineage beliefs. We know now that every belief that's ever been believed is encoded in our DNA, in our family, like both matriarchal and patriarchal lineage. Goes all the way back. All of those core beliefs are encoded in our DNA. That doesn't mean we're going to be at the mercy of all of them, but it does mean that we will have mile marker. We'll have things that happen in our childhood where maybe my father was with this young woman that's coming to me and complaining about her husband. That would be one of the things I would ask. Well, tell me about your history, because I'm going to want to help her find what it is her belief system is that she's playing out with her husband. Because I know there's no accident. And I know that if he's a vibrational match for her, that she's got some beliefs that are attracting someone into her life that's going to treat her according to the way she expects to be treated. So maybe we find out that her father was alcoholic and he was absent. And when he did show up, he was negative and blaming and sarcastic. And so so it's sort of like, what happens is if she goes back to a memory, maybe a precipitating event in her life where at age 5 she recalls her father storming out and shaking her like this and telling her she's a bad kid. Well, when something like that happens to a little kid, children universally believe that everything that happens to them is about them somehow. And so this little kid at 5 years old is going to say, what did I do? How is this about me? And her little brain, she's going to be scanning and she's going to be thumbing through those records just as fast until she comes up on a lineage belief that's in storage there. A belief that says, maybe it could say anything, but maybe it says something like, men are dangerous, that men can't be trusted, that no one will love me, that I'm a bad person, that I'm undeserving of love. And whatever it is, her little brain, it's like there's that belief, and it's her brain presents it to her as the reason why this happened. And she doesn't question it, she just takes it on. And that then becomes the lens through which she sees the world. And now vibrationally, because she's taken that on, she's transmitting that energy of that thought. And now when she walks out in the world, when she looks around, when she starts looking for men in her life, she's unconsciously looking for the men who match that belief system. And she will attract to her and be attracted to men who will prove her right, that this is the way men are.
Right, right. And so how does this woman who had that experience as a child, how does she transition to observer consciousness?
Well, Carl Jung used to say, anything we can make conscious, we can heal. So just beginning to understand that this is just a belief and not my reality. So we teach a questioning process of like, okay, just because you believe that, does that make it true? And when you believe it, how do you feel? And when you feel that way, how do you act? And when you act like that, what does the other person see? What does it invite from the other? And what happens is we begin to discover how it is that we play our part in teaching people how to treat us according to what we expect and believe we will get. Not what we want, but what we believe we expect.
Okay.
And once we see that, now it's conscious. Now we can actually see ourselves in the process. And if you can see yourself in the process, then at any moment you can step back and observe. At any moment you can step back and ask the question rather than blindly play it out. Makes all the difference in the world.
Okay. Do you see a lot of people who come to you have had addiction in their family growing up? What is the root cause? Pardon?
There's a dysfunction of all kinds. I believe that the real addiction, and this comes from having worked in the addiction field for many, many years and myself going through a recovery process around addiction, coming from a family of addicts. This process has been one that I not only teach, but that I use every day. My children use it. My grandchildren use it. It was on my father's side, there was every kind of ism you can imagine: rage addiction, sexual addiction, alcoholism. On my mother's side of the family, my mother came from a matriarchal lineage where her mother handed her ancient universal principles that she then taught me from the age of 7. And so very young in life, even as I was going through all this dysfunction, I had these tools that allowed me to ask the questions and begin. It set me on the path to do what I do today. So I got distracted. What was it?
Well, I just asked if the people who come to you, if they had addiction in their families, like if they grew up with a parent who was addicted.
Yeah, and I was saying that I believe that it's not the addictions that is the really primary addiction. It's what we're primarily addicted to is our belief system. And and then all other addictions are secondary. They come out of that. Because if I have a belief system, an addiction to seeing myself as someone who's unlovable, and I'm gathering evidence for that because I'm going out and I'm vacillating to, I'm attracted to and attracting into my life vibrationally the people. And it's not because I'm stupid or dumb or sick. This is what we're here to do. How do I know that? Well, because everybody I know is doing it on some level. Of course, there are more painful stories than others. Some of us have come from extreme dysfunction. Some of us come from less so. But nonetheless, we're all working on a story that we've taken on and that we see the world through. And as we make it conscious, that it becomes a vehicle for awakening. It becomes how we grow, how we expand, how we learn to use the tools. Because the reality formula, for one, is a tool that we're born with. And that is, when we believe it, we will feel it, we will act it, and we will prove it. This is only true for every single one of us. But now, if that's true, and we question what we believe, and then now we begin to take on, well, how would I like to see it? And what would I want to replace this with? And can I believe that that's true? Could it be just as true, if not truer, than the unhappy story? And then I begin to gather evidence for that. And now I've learned to use that tool in a way to manifest the life of my dreams.
Okay.
So it's like it's a training. It's a
Right.
training.
Right. So you talked about the inverted triangle, and then there's the other triangle with observer consciousness, but then there's two other points to that triangle. Could you talk
Yeah.
about those a little bit?
Yeah, so when you've got the downward triangle of the three positions, and that's us in blame,
Mm-hmm.
and then you begin to step up to the fourth position, which now that turns that triangle into a diamond,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that also, and what that does automatically when you step into observer is you begin to access the other end of the spectrum, the contrast to the persecutor or rescuer.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like the transformed persecutor becomes a respectful leader. It's someone who's boundaried, who knows how to go for what they want, who's clear on what's appropriate and what's not, who knows how to say no. And then you also have the transformed rescuer,
Mm-hmm.
who rather than caretaking, fixing, enabling, disabling, becomes the nurturer, the one who is empathetic, who knows how to be there and empower rather than mollycoddle and um, carry and fix. And
Mm-hmm.
actually, rescuers do as much to to perpetuate the victim triangle as anyone, because
Mm-hmm.
they very often are. What we do as rescuers is train people to be victims,
Mm-hmm.
because rescuers need someone to fix in order to feel important, in order
Mm-hmm.
to feel valid, in order to feel like I'm somebody. And so then they will have somebody who is dependent upon them, who's needy, in order for them to feel good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so they actually set their children, and and we see a lot of it even at the government level, where it's handouts and it's and people and victims, people who feel powerless.
Mm-hmm.
That's a steep price to pay to feel loved
Mm-hmm.
and connected. It's like, okay, in order to be loved in my family, I have to be the one who's the problem, who can't get it right, who is not able to stand on their own, who
Mm-hmm.
is weak or sickly or fragile or whatever it is, and so that mom can feel good. I
Mm-hmm.
remember when my own youngest child, who was the helpless baby, as we call the victim when we teach this model to children, the helpless baby in my family. I remember when she began to get really conscious around this, and we were really working on this dynamic together, and she said, I just thought that was that you liked it when I needed you. I thought I loved it. I loved doing that for you because I could see that it made you happy when you were
Mm-hmm.
taking care of me.
Mm-hmm.
And so you see, I was training her to be
Yeah.
dependent.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, on, if that had been left alone, then she would be out in the world today, needing others to take care of her and thinking, and see what she's given up: her own independence, her sense of self, her sense of um, empowerment,
Mm-hmm.
ability to take care of herself, all because she wants to be loved. And that's the thing. We
Mm-hmm.
take on these roles, starting gate positions, which means that each one of those positions, even though we move around them on the triangle, we will all have a propensity
Mm-hmm.
for one of the three.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There are, and we call these starting gates.
Right.
And it's dependent on the core belief that we take on. There are rescuing starter beliefs, and persecutor starting beliefs, and victim starting beliefs.
Right.
Victims believe that they can't take care of themselves. They need somebody else to do it for them.
Mm-hmm.
Persecutors believe the world is dangerous, so I need to attack. I need to get you before you get me. And rescuers believe that the only way I can be important is if I establish my worth by taking care of those around me.
Hmm.
And so this sets us up for starting gate positions. But once we're on there, each one of those starting gate positions will move around the triangle in their
Right.
own unique way.
Right. So someone who maybe has read your book or has been through your workshop or has done other types of therapy and find themselves now in the observer triangle. Could you describe that type of person? Like, what are their qualities? What are some of the things that they do now that they're in observer consciousness?
Well, they don't expect themselves to live always in observer consciousness. It's not a stagnant state. None of these are.
Okay.
It's sort of like, I think the handout I sent you with the two triangles shows that figure 8 in there. Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
Yeah, I have it here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And that is, yeah, there it is. That's right. So the upper triangle it shows that we move. We go up and then we go down. We go up and what we do and we go down.
Okay.
And what happens is as soon as we recognize we're on the lower triangle, we take ownership of it. And as soon as we take ownership of it, we're automatically have moved up to the observer. Now we begin to ask ourselves the question, what can I learn from this? There's no accident here. How is this for me? How can I grow from this? What can I do to take responsibility for myself right here, right now? How can I empower myself and empower the other? What do I need? How do I take responsibility for me? And so we begin to act in those ways. So it's a fluid sort of, it's a process, not a I've arrived place.
Okay. I see.
I see it as a wheel. You know, the Buddhists like to talk about the wheel of suffering, right?
Yeah.
And so if you were to take that wheel and you were to put that reality diamond on that wheel. And at the top of the wheel is the observer. That's where we all want to be. We want to be up there where we've got the mountaintop experience, where we're seeing clearly, we understand where we are, we're aligned, which means we're satisfied with our life and we feel good about where we are, and we're not blaming anyone, and we recognize and we're using the reality formula in order to manifest what we want in our lives. That's the top of the triangle, right? But the wheel, what do wheels do? They turn. You know, there is without a wheel on a car, you're not going to move forward. And if you can't move forward, there's no progress. And so the wheel is going to turn, and so at the bottom is that victim triangle, and that's when we're in our story, where we're believing some unhappy, limiting, reductive belief about ourselves or the world. We're looking out, we're saying that's not fair, that shouldn't be like that, and we're instead of feeling satisfied, we are dissatisfied. We are angry with the way things are. We feel ashamed, or we feel afraid, and that's telling us that we're in that low frequency victim triangle. And so what happens is we fall off the mountaintop as the wheel turns. We're inevitably going to go down here. It's how fast do I wake up? How long does it take me to recognize, oh, I'm in low frequency. I'm down under the wheel now. And then we begin to use the tools to bring us back up. But the only way to grow is to go around the wheel. What goes up must come down. And it's more like a spiral. And you can think of it as an ascending spiral rather than as a wheel that goes forward like this. It's an ascending spiral. So as I go down, but I never have to quite cover that ground again, because even when I come down, I'm still, if I start here, and the next time I come around, I'm here, and the next time I come around, I'm here, and so I'm evolving. I'm evolving through the process of going around the wheel, and this is what Earth School is all about. So there's no problem with being on the victim triangle. We like to think that, oh, well, I'm going to learn of this model and I'll never have to go there again. And if I do go there, it means I'm not doing something right. No, it just means now it's time for the second round. It's time for another lesson. It's time for another refinement.
Right.
As I move
up. It's interesting that you mentioned the circle and completing the circle, because a lot of what my podcast is about, ordinary people sharing their hero's journey. And I don't know how familiar you are with Joseph Campbell and the hero's journey, but it's like a circle. You start in one place, you go on that adventure, you have trials and tribulations, you learn from them, you gain insights, and then you return to the circle. You're a transformed person. So
It's exactly the same. Yeah, it's exactly this. And the guardian on the threshold that Campbell talks about, those are the stories. They're the ones that want to hold us in the familiar territory, that don't want us to branch out into the unknown. They don't want us to expand. They want to keep us, in the known. I like to call that the victim mind. And I use the nursery rhyme I wrote about in my book, Peter, Pumpkin Eater, Had a Wife, Couldn't Keep Her. So he put her in a pumpkin shell where he kept her very well. And if you think of Peter Pumpkin Eater as being the victim ego, it's that part of us that holds the story and just says, well, you're just a pumpkin. You'll never be more than a pumpkin. Don't expect much from life. And those are the guardians on the threshold. They're the ones who are saying, you don't know what, you don't want to go out there. You don't know that you can handle it. And besides, it's scary out there. And wants to hold us in the known. And the known is the pumpkin. Put us in that. The wife he couldn't keep is the divine feminine. That's the part of us that remembers who we are, that carries the memory of who we are. And so that victim mind, that victim ego wants to stuff that part of us down into the story and hold us there. And as long as it does that, it can keep us very well.
Right.
Keep us in the familiar. And so, but their nature is, or our, there's that in us that wants to expand, that wants to get bigger, that wants to come out of that pumpkin patch.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I talk to people and ask them about, their stories, and I always ask about the mentors and the people that have helped them along their journey, and there are the mentors, but then there are usually the people that want to hold them down, that want to keep them in their place, or they want to keep that, they don't want them to go out and do this adventure or start this new business or whatever it is. They want to keep them in their place. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, that's the story keepers. They're the ones that are representing. They are that part, because everyone in our life is going to be a projection of some part of us. And so when I have those voices in my own head that say, "Don't do that. That's not safe." That can be a parent or people who really, quote, love us, but they don't know how to love us. They think that loving us means keeping us safe, which means keeping us contained and limited. And then there are those in the guiding principles. One of the guiding principles is the law of reflection, which is the law of contrast, which says that you must have the contrast. You must have that which to resist against in order to expand. So you've got to have the limiting in order to, because you've got to have something to push against, to say, it's like you have to know what you don't want in order to refine what you do want. It's like, I know I don't want that. This is not what I want. But what we do is we get all fixated on pushing against that rather than going, oh, that's not what I want. Let me see, what do I want? I'm going for that. And that's what the hero does. The hero says, I'm going for that. I know what I don't want. These limiters in my life, they help me know what I don't want. They show me how I'm keeping myself back. They represent the part of my mind that's the naysayers in my own mind. They're showing me where it is I'm naysaying. They're opening their mouths and saying out loud to me the things that my inner voices are saying to me that I don't even hear. I'm so used to them. They just blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So they're essential. They're an essential part.
Right. Okay. Is there anything else about the hero's journey and the victim consciousness where you see similarities or you see some sort of connection between the two?
Probably, but I can't.
Okay. No, that's okay.
Coming to mind right this second.
That's okay, because I was going to go on to ask you another question, but I wanted to see if you had anything else you wanted to add about that.
Yeah, thank you.
So you wrote the book in 2010, and a lot has changed since then. How do you see victim consciousness in the U.S. or just in the world in general? How has it changed since you wrote the book?
Well, in some ways, it's gotten bigger because I see it in our political system today. I see a kind of what I call a victim competition that goes on. I've been called a victim basher by people who don't understand that I'm not I'm not bashing victims. I
Mm-hmm.
believe that people truly, there is true victim.
Mm-hmm.
But I also know that it never works. I will never heal. I will never find peace as long as I'm busy blaming my persecutors and perpetrators.
Mm-hmm.
I can't heal from there. Um, but I can heal when I see it, when I begin to frame it as an initiation, as this is something that I can move forward from, and this is something that I can overcome and rise above, and that's the hero's journey.
Mm-hmm.
And so I see that I see the law of contrast at play, and at the same time, and in exact proportion to, maybe, I don't know that that's true, but that's my story,
Mm-hmm.
is that as I'm watching the victim consciousness grow, and get more visible. Maybe grow is not the right word. Just get more visible. People are more out there, and there's a whole lot of bashing, persecutors, and and preaching to them and fixing them and attacking them. So that's all on the triangle, right?
Mm-hmm.
And what the law says, universal law says, what you push against, what you resist persists. It doesn't go away. It gets bigger. And so because the law is that whatever you pay attention to expands. That's the universal law. And so rather than push against, we learn to turn our head away from and look at what we do want instead. And I'm seeing more of that too. And it's been, oh, so exciting for me since my book has come out, to watch how many more people are hungry for the work and get it. They're ready to get it. There's this awakening going on, and I see it on all sorts of levels. People stepping out and becoming more aware of ourselves as vibrational beings, and really understanding more, and the research and science that is now coming forward. Biology of belief, I think of Dr. Bruce Lipton, if you're familiar with that, where they have found in biology, in the biology of the cells, the powerful influence of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
That the body is the first servant of the brain, of the mind.
Mm-hmm.
So what the mind believes, the body manifests.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're seeing more of that kind of research, and more of those kinds of things. Dr. Joe Dispenza and his work with the brain, and the way the brain thinks, and the waves of the brain, and how it is that we can influence and affect our surroundings by the thoughts we think,
Mm-hmm.
and those kinds of things. So science is catching up with these ancient principles that have been around
Mm-hmm.
since the beginning,
Mm-hmm.
really. The mystery schools have passed these things down. Christ was, in my mind, the example. He showed us how to live beyond victim consciousness. He was not a victim. He was a victim who never went into victim consciousness. He
Mm-hmm.
never blamed. He never pointed the finger and said, I'm going to get even. He never turned and attacked. He just stayed aligned with who he was
Mm-hmm.
and
Hmm.
what he was from, with what he knew.
Hmm.
And that is a model for us. He showed us how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And he talks about the belief, the size of a mustard seed, and all of that. It's what you believe that
Mm-hmm.
determines. And so I've watched, and certainly in my life, I've been using these principles and verifying them for a very long time. So I have no qualm, no doubt about it. I know these principles are true, and
Mm-hmm.
I know they work.
Mm-hmm.
I use them every day. And the more you use them, the better you get at just sort of saying, well, I want that. And I'm going to see myself with that, and I'm going to believe that's possible, and I question the parts of me that say, well, you can't have that. You're not enough to deserve that. And I question those, so I've learned how to use that reality formula to work for me, and to manifest what it is that I
Mm-hmm.
want in my life, and to attract to me the things that are
Right.
important.
Do you still offer your workshops?
I do. I have one coming up in January, and then another one in June.
Could you talk a
Yeah.
little bit about what the process, or what a schedule looks like at one of your workshops?
Yeah, the 2 day, which will be in January, it's like it's a deep dive, a 2 day intensive, which means that you come in and that one is going to be about the guiding principles. So that one's going to be all about recognizing what your core belief story is. So I always start out with an introduction of the reality formula and the triangle and the story, the core beliefs. There's a core belief cycle that I've developed over the years that helps people understand what it is they're believing. It's in my book, Finding Your Core Beliefs. So I take people through a really brief run through that, and then we begin to work with questioning those core beliefs. And we do it experientially. There are ways to unwind the story physically because we carry these stories in ourselves. So we actually work with people to take them back through psychodrama and through actual energy release work to let go, to release their story and move, and then learning about the guiding principles and how to use them, how to pull them in and use them as tools to help you maintain and to pull in when it is that you catch yourself in an old story. So that's basically what it is. And then the training in June is a 7 day. And so that's much more intensive where we actually take people much deeper in and sustain it so that they actually get a good example so that when they leave there, they know what the daily practice is. They've been practicing it for 7 days. They've got a head start on a new life. And then that's also part of our certification. People come and so we have people there everyone is there for their own personal growth, but then there will be people there also who are there in training. So they are there as interns, also learning about how to use the process and how to use the reality formula with others. So
would these be yoga instructors or social workers or what?
These can be people from nurses, anything from nurses to psychologists to coaches, a lot of coaches, body workers, people who work with people and who want to add this to their toolbox.
Okay.
Yeah.
So tell me, who are some of your mentors? Who are some people that helped you along your journey?
Well, I mentioned Christ, so certainly I'm not a member of any particular church, but I certainly think of Christ as a model for me of what it looks like to live outside of victim consciousness. So that was early on. My mother, because she handed me the guiding principles, and I studied with her on Sundays from the time I was about 11. I would sit in her chair across from her in her bedroom, and she taught me all about being a vibrational being and how to recognize it, how to feel that, how to see energy. So those were my early mentors. Carl Jung, a woman named Jacqueline Small, who's an author of 7 or 8 books, and I was on staff with her for 11 years and traveled with her doing integrative breath work and learning that kind of work. John Barnes, myofascial release, learning about how the body knows how to release the story it carries, and he's a physical therapist who teaches physical therapy, and I am not a physical therapist. He told me at the time when I went to study him, which has been now, 15 years ago or more, he told me that I was the first one he had come through who was not there as a physical therapist, but was there for the emotional catharsis of the work. And he was really intrigued by that at that time. I bet he's had a lot of us come through since then. So myofascial and learning about the body and how the body stores energy. My son has also been a teacher for me. He works with me in these workshops, and we've worked together for 20 years. And he is a massage therapist, dancer. He's a master ballet instructor and understands the body and because he has these principles that I've handed him since he was a little kid that came down through me and through my lineage. And now he's a master of that, and so he certainly has taught me a lot about the body and how the body works. So who? Gosh, there's been many, many, many
Okay.
metaphysical teachers. Alice Bailey's work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, she was a big influence for me. She has a very
Mm-hmm.
extensive library.
Yeah.
Yogananda. Um, just yogi, and yoga is a big important part of my work.
Mm-hmm.
I do a daily practice that involves yoga every day. I take ballet. I started taking ballet at the age of 66. Had never danced before in my life, and now,
Really?
oh, at age 64, I'm 66 now.
Uh-huh.
So it's been 2 years. Take it from my son, and I
Wow.
love it. And matter of fact, I went into my physician, had my physical, and she told me I had grown an inch. And she was like, that's like, no, and not at age 66, you don't grow an inch taller. I said, well, you do if you do ballet, and
Wow.
the alignment and learning
Yeah.
how to carry the body and how to,
Yeah.
it stretches you. It stretches you when you begin to,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
great.
really interesting. We've learned that because when you have a story that's of like worthlessness, if you have a story that says I'm not good enough, there'll be a
Mm-hmm.
collapse, and
Mm-hmm.
you'll carry it in your structure, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and so you become a transmitter. Your body actually transmits the message, and you will attract people. I remember working with a pedophile back in who was in he was uh, in a rehab program
Mm-hmm.
and incarceration. And this was back in the 70s. And I asked him, how do you know? How do you pick your victims? And he said, I could take you right now to a playground, a school playground, and I could show you the child. I could point out to you the child that I could molest and get away with. He
Wow.
said that she will emanate it, that nobody cares what happens to me. And you see, that's in her body language. And so
Mm-hmm.
we carry this, so we're transmitting messages, we're transmitting who we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the ways that we attract to us what we attract. This is one of the ways we do that. So we have learned that. So, and we found, Andrew and I, that when you move into right alignment, so one of the things we do with people is we help them identify their body posture, their
Mm-hmm.
pattern, and then correct it and align it. And
Mm-hmm.
because when you move into alignment, it's really difficult to believe the story. As soon as you start telling yourself the story, the body will reflect it.
Mm-hmm.
And so it becomes a way of knowing, oh, I'm in my story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in my story. Oh, and then as soon as you bring yourself into alignment, you can't think the thoughts of that frequency. It just,
Yeah.
so it's that interesting that we
Yeah.
have found that. So yeah, it's things like that.
Mm-hmm. So what's next for you? What are your plans for the next short term or long term, however you want to share?
Oh man, I'm having such a good time. I'm taking this out internationally now. We've got an extensive mailing list, and I have traveled with it. I went to London, been to Copenhagen, and taking the teaching out. I'm hoping my plan right now, my desire is to take it to Europe in late summer and do a European tour there and teach the reality formula. I'm just wanting to spread the message. Just take the work out there and spread it. So we're doing a lot of online work. We are, as I said, we built a model for children, and Danielle Alvarez Greer, who's there in Chattanooga, is spearheading that. She's training and teaching people how to take it out to children.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Is that for at-risk children or just anybody?
children
Yeah.
everywhere,
Yeah.
and private school, public school. She has taken that model into special needs kids. She and myself, we had a team on the ground for some years as I was developing that program. It took about 5 years, and she and I worked together for 5 years developing that program for kids. And we would bring families to my place in Monteagle, where whole families, and these would be oftentimes special needs kids or facial differences, children who were born with birth differences in their face and had surgery and that kind of thing, and the bullying that their families and that those children would go through in the families, and how to deal with the dynamic where blah, blah, blah. We would bring those families up. And so and then she also took the model to the border, Mexican border, and took it into an orphanage there. And so the model, it's been tried and true on the ground. It's amazing how quickly kids take to this model. We can introduce it in 15 minutes, and children get the roles. They just get it. And you can give a 15-minute introduction and say, "Do you know anyone in your house who's a helpless baby?" "Hi, my mom was a helpless baby this morning." They get it.
Yeah.
And then they call themselves on it. And it's a way of helping the bully without shaming. So calling the bully to responsibility without pointing the finger and making them a bad kid. We like to say there are no bad kids, only unhappy kids, kids who believe unhappy thoughts and therefore feel and act as if it's true. And we help them see that anytime they move into bully, they're going to end up down here in victim. There's going to be a bigger bully that comes along. It might be the school principal. It might be, whoever it is.
Right.
Somebody will, and they begin to get that, and we begin to show them alternatives. And those kids, very often, bullies will turn into respectful leaders. We've watched it again and again and again. So it's a powerful model for families, for kids. We're taking it. I'm wanting to take it more into the corporate world, the business world, so that companies begin to understand that this is a way of expanding business, of really getting people on board, their employees on board, where they feel heard and listened to. It's a conflict resolution process. And we have, like I said, the Reality Formula Live, where people who want to can subscribe and learn more about all of this online with me. As they can ask questions, and I do presentations, live presentations, and then they can interact with me. And I think it's like $12 a month. That's not going to be that inexpensive long, but once you get on board, then you get locked in at that price. So regardless of what it goes up to, you're at that price. So we're making that available so that nobody's left behind. That and then my blog. I've got like 600 pages of information on my blog. That's all free, open, people, available.
And that's on your website?
That's on my website, LynneForrest.com, and that's LynneForrest.com for people who are interested in that.
Yep, I'll link to that in the show notes. And then so if they go to that website, then they can find your blog, and they can find what other information can they find on your website? They can find
out about certification. They can find out about coaching sessions. I offer one-on-one sessions with people. We use Zoom which is like Skype, video calls, and that makes this work accessible to people wherever they are who want to work with me. And let's see what else they can find out about events and the things we've got coming up. And just it's a training, just the home page, because it's a study. You can go through and hit whatever's highlighted and then go there and learn about that. Like the word observer consciousness, you hit on that and there'll be it'll take you to my blog where I've written about observer consciousness. And so you can actually get a synopsis of the work just by reading the home page. I'm really I want to reach people at every level. And of course that requires support. So we also help people who will jump on board with us and come to our events and which are more expensive. But we have it at every level, this work offering. And that's been our goal, and that's what we've been.
Well, good,
so we're busy.
Yeah, sounds like it. Is there any?
I have a dedicated staff.
Oh, do you?
Oh, yeah. Well, it's my daughter. And Zach Zingoldi, who's also there in Chattanooga, and he's our internet guru. He's the one that does all the online stuff. And then they're my two loyal standbys. They are so dedicated to the work. But I wanted to say that of my children, every one of my children have helped me with this work on some level at some point. They all believe in this work. They all use it in their lives. My daughter has passed it on to my grandchildren. My grandchildren were raised with this model, and they use it in their lives. They've taken it to their teachers.
Yeah.
It's been very rewarding to have my own family feel the way I do about it and know because it works.
Yeah. And it sounds like it was passed down to you from your mom.
Yes, yes, yeah. So it's been
Yeah.
sort of a lineage, and this is how I know I'm here doing what I came here to do.
Yeah. That's great. That's great. Is there anything else you want to share? Anything else that you want to mention before we wrap up?
This has been really fun, Carleena.
It has been
Thank you
fun.
so much for your curiosity and your good questions and your listening ear. You've
Oh,
been a good audience for me, and
well, thank you. This has been fun. I've learned a
yes,
lot. I've learned a lot from you.
thank you so much.
Yeah, I look forward to meeting you in person one day.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we'll do it. We'll have coffee.
Okay, sounds good. All right. Well, thank you, Lynn.
Thank you, Carleena. Have a good evening.
Okay, you too. Bye-bye.
Bye.